Would you raise your children with love if you knew that one day they would fight to take what is yours from you? That morning, Dona Elvira woke up before sunrise, as she always did. Her body already ached as usual, but the habit of getting up early was still stronger than any pain. She made coffee, opened the window, and took a deep breath of the cold air, believing that another ordinary day was about to begin. But the phone rang. On the other end of the line was the voice of her brother's lawyer, who had passed away months before. He spoke calmly, with that cold formality of someone delivering news without knowing its weight. Dona Elvira, the will has been read. Mr. Geraldo left everything in your name, the house, the land, and the savings. For a few seconds, she didn't answer. Her heart raced, not out of ambition, but out of shock. She and her brother had hardly spoken for years. Even so, he remembered her. The news spread quickly. Before sunset, the children were at the door. Rogerio arrived first, his suit rumpled, his gaze calculated. Claudia was right behind her, with the same sweet smile as always, but now there was something different about it. They sat at the table, and the silence seemed heavier than air. "Mom, Uncle left this for the whole family," said Rogerio, adjusting his watch. "You can't spend it all alone." "We have a right to it too," added Claudia, without looking her in the eye. Elvira lowered her gaze to the already cold coffee. It wasn't what they said. It was the tone. The same tone she had never heard from her own children. Suddenly, the love she had created with so much sacrifice began to unravel, like an old thread breaking between her fingers. She realized, with a heavy heart, that money doesn't change people. It only shows who they really are. And that night, while the wind rattled the window and the silence of the house seemed sadder than ever, Dona Elvira discovered that love may have a price, but dignity does not. What she didn't yet know was that the will held a secret that would change everything again. Dona Elvira was never one to complain about life. From a young age, she learned that destiny doesn't ask if we're ready. It simply happens. And when her husband died, more than 20 years ago, she just took a deep breath, wiped away her tears, and moved on. Not because she was strong, but because she had no choice. She had 2 young children, Rogerio and Claudia, and a small house, almost as tired as she was. For years, she worked as a seamstress. She spent entire nights sewing party dresses that she would never have anywhere to wear. The sound of the sewing machine was the sound that lulled her children to sleep. While other children slept, hers played with scraps of fabric, and she, even exhausted, looked at them with a tired smile but full of pride. Each line she sewed was a silent promise. "You will have a better life than mine." Time passed. Rogerio grew up determined, but with ambitions too big for his heart. He talked about money from a young age. He wanted to get ahead in life, as he used to say. Claudia was the opposite, sweet, calm, sensitive, but she let her brother speak for her, as if he always knew better. Elvira never complained about the lack of help, nor about absences. When Rogerio got married, she sold part of her meager savings to pay for part of the wedding. When Claudia became unemployed, she gave up buying her own medicine to send what she had. She never expected gratitude. She did it because she believed that a mother's love was the only wealth worth sharing. At Sunday lunches, the simple wooden table was always the center of her life. It was there that she laughed, served, listened, dreamed. Even when her children came rushing in, looking at their watches, she pretended not to notice. She talked about good things, avoided serious subjects. Elvira believed that love, if pure enough, was enough to hold a family together. But time has a cruel way of teaching what love doesn't want to see. The distance between them began to grow. The calls became short, the visits infrequent. "It's life's busy," she told herself. But deep down, she knew. She was no longer a priority. What hurt most wasn't her children's silence. It was realizing that their affection always came with a request. A favor, borrowed money, help, just for a while. And each time she gave in, she felt a thread of her heart wear down a little more. Even so, she never said anything. Those who knew her said that Dona Elvira was too gentle, but she called it patience. "God knows what he's doing," she repeated when tears insisted on appearing. On rainy days, she liked to sit on the porch and sew clothes for neighbors. It was her refuge. The sound of the needle going in and out of the fabric calmed her mind, and somehow mended her soul as well. There, among threads and scraps of cloth, Elvira felt useful, alive, needed. But the truth is, she felt alone. And however much her pride tried to hide it, a mother's heart always hopes, even when it says it doesn't. She hoped for a hug without ulterior motives. She hoped for a visit out of longing, not self-interest. She hoped to hear an "I love you" that didn't come with a request. And even without receiving any of that, she continued to believe that deep down, her children's love still existed. It was just tired, hidden, distracted by life, until that day. The day the lawyer called, and the word inheritance entered the conversation. It was as if the wind in the house had shifted. The same phone that once brought good news now carried what she didn't yet know would be the worst trial of her life. Elvira didn't celebrate the inheritance. She prayed. She asked for wisdom, because she knew that when money enters through the door, character usually flies out the window. She didn't imagine that, a few days later, she would hear words from her own children that no mother deserves to hear. Not even in a dream, not even in the cruelest of truths. But life sometimes tests even the kindest hearts. And Dona Elvira was about to discover that the love she thought unbreakable could be shattered by the dry sound of one word: inheritance. Dona Elvira's life had always had a calm and predictable rhythm. The sun was her alarm clock, and the smell of coffee her first hug of the day. She did the same things as always: swept the yard, fed the chickens, watered the plants, and thanked God for the little she had. Because for her, a little with peace was always worth more than a lot with worry. The house was simple, but alive. The walls held old laughs, the kitchen clock marked the time like an old friend, and the old radio kept her company while she sewed. Loneliness didn't hurt. What hurt, however, was the longing for her children, but she transformed it into prayer. From time to time, Rogerio would appear, always in a hurry. He would arrive talking about work, business, investments. He never stayed long, and he almost never looked her in the eye. But Elvira was content with little. She prepared his favorite dish, even knowing he would say, "I can't stay long, Mom." Claudia, on the other hand, came more often. She brought smiles, flowers, and stories. But over time, those smiles began to change tone. It was a smile that expected something in return. She no longer came just out of longing. She came to ask for help, get a little money in advance, borrow just until next month. And Elvira gave, always gave, because a mother's heart doesn't calculate, only the desire to see her children well. One afternoon, while sewing, she heard the phone ring. It was Claudia, the same sweet voice as always, but with a disguised urgency. "Mom, Rogerio mentioned the inheritance. Have you been to the lawyer yet?" Elvira hesitated to answer. "Not yet, daughter. I'll go next week. It's just that Rogerio said it's a lot, isn't it? Maybe you need help to solve this." "I'll manage," he replied, trying to sound firm. After he hung up, Elvira remained silent. The radio played an old song, but she didn't hear it. She felt a tightness in her chest, a feeling she couldn't name. Maybe it was distrust, maybe fear, or maybe just a mother's intuition warning her that something was about to change. In the following days, Rogerio appeared again, this time with papers in his hand and an overly wide smile. "Mom, did you see how much Uncle's land is worth? If you sell everything, you can invest." Elvira looked at him and calmly replied, "I haven't even thought about that yet, son. But you have to think about it, Mom. Money sitting idle is money lost. Son, sometimes what we save isn't to generate returns, it's to protect." Rogerio gave a short laugh. "That's something only someone who doesn't understand money would say, Mom." Elvira smiled sadly. "And maybe that's why I still understand love." He didn't answer. He just looked at his watch and said he needed to go. The house grew colder after he left. And for the first time, she realized that the smell of coffee that once warmed her heart now carried a bitter taste, the taste of something that was slowly being lost. As the weeks passed, her life changed without changing. Her children called more often. The conversations always revolved around the same theme. "Have you sorted out the paperwork, Mom? Will you need someone to help? Do you want me to go to the bank with you?" These weren't innocent questions, and she knew it. But she pretended to believe it, because pretending was easier than admitting that her children's love might be mixing with the smell of money. One night, while sewing, she heard the sound of rain on the roof. The memory came like a lightning bolt. The day she sewed Claudia's graduation dress, crying with joy. She had promised herself that she would do everything so that her daughter would never go hungry. And now, there she was, asking, demanding, planning what the mother didn't even know if she wanted. Elvira took a deep breath. She ran her hand over the fabric on the table and felt the same texture as always, but the world around her no longer had the same color. On Sunday, she prepared lunch as she always did: beans, rice, stewed chicken, and cornbread. She waited. The children came, but the atmosphere was different. Fake smiles, forced compliments. Rogerio spoke too loudly. Claudia looked at her cell phone the whole time. "Mom, have you decided what you're going to do with the land?" Rogerio asked, cutting the cake. "Not yet. I'm thinking of leaving it as it is." He let out an impatient sigh. "Mom, you need to understand that we have to think about the future." Elvira observed him calmly. "And you, Rogerio, when was the last time you thought about my present?" Silence fell over the table. Claudia tried to change the subject, but her mother only smiled, a tired smile that said more than any words. After the children left, she collected the plates, washed the dishes, and looked at the empty table. The old wood bore the marks of time, of life, of family. But at that moment, she had the feeling that this was the last lunch where love still had a place at the table. In the following days, Elvira began to sleep poorly. She dreamed of her deceased brother. He smiled, but said nothing. She woke up with a heavy heart, feeling that the gift he left behind might not be a blessing, but a test. And it was in this silence of her soul that she understood what she was about to lose. It wasn't the tranquility, nor the simplicity of her old life. It was something much greater, the certainty that she was still loved by her own children. But love, when it begins to be measured, is already dying. And on that Thursday, the sky dawned heavy, and the cold wind seemed to announce that something bad was coming. Donna Elvira woke up with a heavy heart, without knowing why. She made coffee, but the smell brought no peace. The kitchen clock struck 10 when she heard the gate slam. 2 pairs of hurried footsteps entered. It was Rogerio and Claudia, without warning, without a smile. "Mom, we need to talk," Rogerio said seriously, dropping his briefcase on the table. "Now? Did something happen?" "Yes, something did." He pulled up a chair. "We can't postpone this conversation any longer." Elvira looked at them both, confused. Claudia avoided eye contact, fidgeting with her hands. Rogerio took a deep breath. "It's about the inheritance." That word seemed to weigh heavily in the air. Inheritance. Since his brother died, it was as if that word had a life of its own. It wandered through the house, seeped into the cracks, and now it was there, alive, sitting at the table with them. "What about the inheritance, Rogerio? You know that Uncle left everything in your name, but it's unfair." He adjusted his body, as if preparing for a rehearsed speech. "It belongs to the whole family. He left it to me," she replied calmly. "It was his choice. But you've lived your life, Mom." His voice rose. "We have rights, too." Claudia tried to intervene, in a sweeter but equally cold tone. "Mom, Rogerio only wants what's fair. Uncle always said that was for us, too." Elvira lowered her eyes. "Did you hear that from him?" Silence. No one answered. She continued in a serene voice, "I haven't even thought about what I'm going to do yet. What he left behind is more responsibility than luck." "Responsibility?" Rogerio laughed humorlessly. "That's wealth, Mom. You could change everyone's lives with that." "And who said I want to change?" she replied firmly. "I'm satisfied with what I have." Her son's patience seemed to break. "You're selfish," he shouted. "You spent your whole life saying you did everything for us. Now you have a chance to share something big, and you shut yourself off like this?" Those words hit hard, like stones. They were the same hands she taught to write, the same eyes that once asked for comfort. Now they were judging her. "I always shared everything, Rogerio. Everything I had, and even what I didn't have. But now it's different. It's always different when the money comes in, isn't it?" Claudia began to cry. "Mom, we don't want to fight, But Roger is right. No, daughter. Elvira took a deep breath. Roger is in a hurry, and the hurry for money never matches the time for love. Silence fell like a sentence. Roger stood up. You'll regret it. Maybe, son, she replied. But I'd rather regret it than sell myself. He laughed ironically. You think you're giving a moral lesson, but the world is real, Mom. And I think the world gets smaller when love needs a receipt. Claudia stood up hesitantly. She tried to approach, but Elvira was already standing, her face serene, but her eyes full of tears. Do you know what hurts, my children? She asked, her voice trembling. It's not seeing you fighting over money. It's clear that everything I taught you my whole life was for nothing. Tears fell without her realizing it. When your father died, I promised him I would do everything to raise you with dignity. I sewed to support this house. I went cold so you could sleep warm. I went without food so that no one would go hungry. She paused. And now, after everything, this is how you thank me. Arguing about what is mine, as if I were a stranger? Claudia cried silently. Rogerio looked away, but didn't back down. Nobody is disrespecting you, Mother. No? She asked. When love starts asking for explanations, it's already disrespect. The silence was long. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder. She took a deep breath and spoke slowly, as if sealing something within herself. My brother's money was left to me, and that's how it will remain. Rogerio turned his back. Then you'll have to deal with the consequences. What consequences? She asked, confused. Losing your own children. It was as if the air had vanished from the room. Those words struck Elvira forcefully. For a moment, she thought she hadn't heard correctly, but the silence confirmed it. They really had said that. Is that it, then? Her voice came out low, hoarse. Is that the price of your love? Rogerio didn't answer. He left, slamming the door. Claudia stood there, undecided. Elvira looked at her. Go after your brother, daughter. You deserve each other. The daughter hesitated. She wanted to say something, but the words wouldn't come. In the end, she just cried and left. When the door closed, the sound echoed throughout the house. Donna Elvira stood in the middle of the room, her hands still trembling. Her heart felt like it was beating outside her chest. She looked around, the table, the old photos, the vase with dried flowers, and realized that the home she had built with so much love was now empty. Not empty of furniture, empty of soul. She sat at the table and stared blankly for long minutes. A whirlwind of memories swirled in her head. Rogerio's first tooth, Claudia's laughter when she received her first doll, the nights she spent awake waiting for the sound of the key in the door when they still came home. And now, nothing. The house too big for the silence, the longing too great to contain in her heart. When night fell, the wind blew through the cracks in the window. Elvira lit a candle and looked at her brother's portrait on the dresser. You knew, didn't you? She murmured. I knew this money would cost me dearly. A tear rolled down her cheek. She wasn't crying for herself. She was crying for the love she thought was eternal, but which had proven fragile. She was crying because she realized that sometimes blood is the thinnest bond there is. And, as the candle flickered, Elvira understood something that hurt more than any loss. The money hadn't changed her children. It had only shown them what, deep down, they had always been. And in that house, where once the laughter of children filled the air, now only the sad sound remained of a mother learning, too late, that nothing hurts more than seeing her children's love turned into mere currency. She was surrounded by living people, but with dead feelings. The following days came slowly. The sun rose but illuminated nothing. Inside the house, time seemed to have stopped the instant the door slammed shut. The same clock that once marked the family's joyful hours now sounded like a reminder of everything that was lost. Donna Elvira tried to follow the routine, sweeping the floor, making coffee, washing the dishes. But nothing had color nor flavor. Her hands did what her heart no longer kept up with. On the first Sunday, she waited. She placed the white tablecloth on the table, each person's favorite dish, the cornbread that Claudia always asked for. She waited until the coffee cooled, until the silence became a burden. No one came. No call. No message. Their absence filled the house like a visitor who won't leave. That night, while putting away the untouched dishes, Elvira felt something break inside her. It wasn't anger. It was the weariness of someone who realizes they loved too much, and yet lost. She went to bed early, but sleep wouldn't come. The room seemed too big. In the dim light, shadows seemed to move across the walls, and the wind made the window creak as if complaining of loneliness. She closed her eyes and thought of her children, still small, sleeping in the same bed, smelling of soap and dreams. She thought of how she used to hold their hands to cross the street, and how now she was going through life alone. "Where did I go wrong?" she murmured in the dark. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Perhaps the mistake was loving too much. Perhaps it was expecting too much. On Monday, the phone rang. For a moment, her heart rejoiced, but it was just a cold voice asking for a document from the lawyer. Rogerio wanted the inheritance papers, not even a "how are you?" Not even a "do you need anything?" Just interest. "Tell him to come and get it," she replied firmly. "I don't keep anything for anyone anymore." She hung up, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't cry. The days passed. The visits ended. The conversations died. But Elvira continued to live, in silence, the way mothers learn when they have no one left to talk to. At night, she sat on the porch, looked at the sky, and talked to God. She asked for nothing, only thanked Him for still being alive, and between sighs she thought, "Lord, if you are going to punish me, let it be with loneliness, but don't let my children lose their love forever." It was a simple but true prayer. Faith was the only good that no one could take from her. Some neighbors began to notice the change. The talkative woman, always ready to help, now hardly left the house. "Are you sick?" they asked. She smiled, tired. "No, I'm just learning to quiet my heart." The words sounded beautiful, but her gaze said otherwise. The former sparkle had faded, and inside her grew the fear of growing old without affection. One afternoon, Claudia called. Her voice was cold, too polite. "Mom, Rogerio wants to settle the division of assets soon." Elvira closed her eyes, took a deep breath. "Division of assets? You've already divided what was most important." On the other end, silence. She continued, "I can lose the money, daughter. What I didn't want to lose was you." The call ended quickly with a "we'll talk later" that never happened. And when the silence returned, she realized that the pain had shifted. It was no longer in her chest. It was in her whole body. On rainy days, the sound of the water hitting the roof brought back memories of when her children still lived there. Their laughter, their running footsteps, the sound of the door opening. Now, the only sound was the wind seeping through the cracks. The house was the same size, but it seemed enormous. Elvira began writing in an old notebook, not letters, but outpourings of her feelings. She jotted down what she felt, as if putting her pain on paper would make her feel lighter. One night she wrote, "I raised my children to be good. I gave them love so they would know how to love. Today I realize I taught them everything I could, but the world taught them the rest, and the world has no heart." She closed the notebook and cried softly, so as not to awaken the memories. Time dragged on. The garden began to wither. The flowers, which she had once cared for with such affection, seemed to reflect her own state, tired, forgotten, without shine. But, amidst the sadness, something began to change. One day, a neighbor knocked on the door, asking for help sewing a piece of clothing for charity. Elvira accepted. While sewing, she felt a thread of peace she hadn't felt in weeks. Helping someone had always been her way of breathing. And there, among the threads and fabrics, she realized the love her children had taken from her still existed. It just needed a different destiny. Even with a wounded heart, she wished no ill on anyone. But a certainty grew within her. If money was the cause of the separation, may God give her the strength to transform it into something good. And it was with this thought that on a quiet morning she decided to return to the lawyer, not to complain, nor to protect herself, but to truly understand what that will said. What she didn't imagine was that that paper held more than numbers and names. It held a lesson, a secret that would change everything, and that would finally restore her peace. The day dawned with a cloudy sky, the kind of day that makes the world seem slower. Donna Elvira got up early, put on her wool coat, tied her hair back, and walked to the lawyer's office. Her heart beat steadily, but without haste. It wasn't anger she felt. It was a need to understand. Upon arriving, the lawyer, a gray-haired man with a calm voice, greeted her respectfully. "Donna Elvira, it's good to see you. Is everything all right?" She smiled kindly. "I don't know what it means to be well anymore, doctor, but I need to understand what my brother left me." The man pulled out an old folder, leafed through some papers, and began to read in a low voice. Elvira watched attentively, her hands firmly in her lap, until he stopped. He paused for a long time. He looked at her, as if deciding whether or not to tell her what he had discovered. "Mrs. Elvira, your brother was a very particular man. He left a special clause in his will." "Clause? What kind?" The lawyer adjusted his glasses. "It says here, if my sister's direct heirs show disunity, greed, or abandonment in relation to her, all the assets will automatically be destined to a charity in her name." Elvira was silent. Her heart seemed to stop for a second. Then she took a deep breath. "So, if they distance themselves because of this, they lose everything?" "Exactly. And they don't know?" "No one but you and me." She leaned back in her chair. A slight smile appeared on his lips, but it was a sad smile. "My brother was always quiet, but he always knew how to see into people's souls." He paused, looking out the window. He knew that money is the kind of proof that reveals more than any words. The lawyer closed the folder. "What do you intend to do, Donna Elvira?" She replied calmly. "Nothing." "Nothing?" "Sometimes silence is the fairest punishment." The days passed. The children didn't call. But fate always finds a way to confront people with the consequences they deserve. 3 weeks later, the phone rang. It was Rogerio. His voice carried a poorly disguised urgency. "Mom, we need to sort out the paperwork. It's best to sign soon." Elvira replied calmly, "Come here. We'll talk together." The next day, the two arrived. They entered without asking permission, with the same air of superiority. But there was something different about them. Perhaps it was the fear of losing what they didn't even have yet. She awaited them, seated at the table, with a cup of coffee and the will on top. Her gaze was firm, but calm. "Mother, we need to resolve this soon," Rogerio began. "I've already spoken to a real estate agent. He can appraise the land." "That won't be necessary, son." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "Because you won't sell anything." Claudia looked at him, confused. "You've decided to keep everything?" "I've decided to keep the peace," she replied. "The rest has already been decided by someone who knew who I was and who you would become." Rogerio snorted. "What does that mean?" Elvira opened the envelope and read aloud, slowly, each word of the clause her brother had left. The silence that followed was heavy. Claudia covered her mouth with her hands. Rogerio turned pale. "Is this a joke?" he asked nervously. "No, my son. It's justice. He couldn't do that. Yes, he could, and he did, because money was never the problem. The problem was always what it awakens in the wrong people." Claudia began to cry. "Mom, I'm sorry." Elvira looked at her sweetly. "I don't need your request, daughter. I need your respect." Rogerio, on the other hand, was still trying to defend himself. "This is unfair. The money was for us. It was for those who knew how to love without measure," she said. "And you failed at that." He stood up, furious. "Are you satisfied? You've ruined everything." "No, Rogerio," she replied firmly. "You're the ones who ruined everything when you put money above me. I'm just accepting what's left." The following minutes were pure silence. Neither of them knew what to say. The truth was there, naked, without any possible defense. Claudia wept uncontrollably, murmuring, "I just wanted to help, Mom." "I know, daughter, but love that helps expecting reward isn't love. It's self-interest." Rogerio, with his fists clenched, looked at his mother and tried one last time. "And what are you going to do with all this now? Are you going to donate it?" Elvira smiled slightly. "Maybe." "Why?" "To transform what was a curse for you into a blessing for someone." He didn't answer. His anger wasn't just about the loss. It was about the shame. She stood up, resting her hands on the table. "You wanted what I have, but I'm the only one who still has what you lost. Peace. The sentence landed like a blow. No shouting, no scandal, just the truth. She looked at them both, her eyes brimming with tears, and added, "A mother's love forgives, but doesn't forget. And yours forgot before forgiving." Rogerio looked away, ashamed. Claudia sobbed. Elvira approached, gently touched her daughter's face, and said, "Go in peace, my girl. Life will still teach you the value of what money can't buy." And then, with a slow gesture, she turned and went to the backyard. The sun was setting on the horizon, and the cold wind touched her face. There was no relief, there was dignity. She knew that love hadn't died, it had only changed location. Now it resided in forgiveness, the kind that liberates without needing applause. That night, she wrote in her notebook, "They wanted my money, but what I valued most was love, and that they themselves threw away." She closed the notebook, turned off the light, and fell asleep with a peaceful heart, feeling that for the first time in a long time, the silence of the house wasn't empty. The following days were different. No longer heavy, nor sad, just light. The kind of lightness that only comes when the soul understands it has done what it should. Dona Elvira woke up early, as always. But now the coffee had a different flavor. It was no longer the usual taste, but the taste of freedom. The freedom of not depending on anyone, of not expecting anything, of not begging for love. The house, once silent with loneliness, now seemed at peace. She began opening the windows early in the morning, letting the sun in, listening to the birds. The plants, which had previously withered, began to bloom again. Perhaps they sensed her heart rebuilding. The phone no longer rang. The children hadn't returned. But curiously, she no longer expected anything. She had learned that love that hurts can transform, and that forgiveness doesn't need to be a reunion. A month later, she returned to the lawyer. She brought with her a decision. "Doctor, I want to donate part of the inheritance." "Donate?" he repeated, surprised. "Are you sure?" She smiled. "I am. I want to help the community daycare, the one that takes care of children without families." The lawyer nodded, moved. "Your brother would be proud." "I hope so," she replied, "because his money, which almost destroyed my family, will now help build others." The daycare was simple, with colorful walls and children's laughter. When Elvira entered, she felt something different. The smell of soap, the sound of small footsteps, the curious gaze of the children, everything seemed to bring life back to her heart. The director, a young and kind woman, embraced her gratefully. "You can't imagine how much this will change our lives." Elvira smiled. "I can imagine," she replied, her eyes welling up with tears, "because one day love also changed mine." From that day on, she began to visit the place frequently. She brought fabrics, mended clothes, made sweets for the children. They called her Grandma Elvira. And every time a small hand held hers, she felt her heart warm in a way she no longer remembered. Sometimes at night, she thought about her children. She wondered if they were well, if they remembered her. But there was no longer any resentment, only a gentle longing, the kind that doesn't hurt. She understood now. A mother's love doesn't need to be reciprocated to exist. One afternoon, while sewing a baby's outfit, a neighbor commented, "Mrs. Elvira, you have a heart of gold." She smiled without lifting her eyes from the fabric. "No, my dear, I have a patched-up heart. But even patches can be beautiful if you sew them with love." Over time, life reorganized itself. The mornings became peaceful again. The coffee smelled like home once more, and her smile, that shy, almost forgotten smile, reappeared. In the mirror, she saw her aged face, the deep wrinkles, the white hair. But for the first time, she felt no sadness. Each wrinkle was a memory, each mark, a story, and deep in her eyes, there was something new. Pride. She didn't have a fortune, but she had peace. She didn't have a present family, but she had purpose. And when she lay down at night, she felt her heart light, not because she had won, but because she had learned that winning sometimes is simply continuing to be good when the world teaches you to be bitter. One morning, a letter arrived. The envelope bore Claudia's handwriting. Elvira remained silent for a while, just staring at the paper. Then she slowly opened it. Inside, a short note. "Mother, forgive me. I understood too late what you always tried to teach me. The money ran out, but the shame remained. If you ever want, I'd like to visit you. With love, Claudia. Elvira smiled, with tears in her eyes. She didn't reply. She didn't need to. She knew that when regret is genuine, time answers for us. She kept the letter in the notebook where she wrote her heartfelt thoughts. And on the last page she wrote, "A mother's love never ends. It only learns to stop kneeling. And when the heart learns to rise, life finally kneels before it." The sunset that day was beautiful. The sky, golden and calm, reflected the same tranquil glow in her eyes. Donna Elvira took a deep breath, looked at the yard full of flowers, and in silence gave thanks. Not for what she lost, but for what she became. It was peace. Time passed. The years brought wrinkles to Donna Elvira's face, but they couldn't take away her serenity. That house, once full of voices and then taken over by silence, was now a haven of peace. In the corner of the room, on the dresser, there were two things: an old portrait of her brother and a new photo of the children from the daycare smiling in the new uniforms she had helped sew. And every time she looked at those cheerful little faces, she thought, "That's why God let me stay." The inheritance that almost destroyed her family became sustenance for others. The money that was a cause of fighting transformed into a sharing of love. And the woman who thought she had lost everything discovered that love, when it is true, knows how to reinvent itself. Forgiveness isn't always a reunion. Sometimes it's just the silent act of continuing to wish well to the one who hurt you. And Elvira learned this late, but she learned it with her whole heart. On rainy days, she still wrote in her notebook. But now, the words had a different tone. They were no longer of pain. They were of gratitude. "Thank you, Lord, for letting me understand that the most beautiful wealth is sleeping in peace and waking up without anger towards anyone." The world outside remained noisy. People continued chasing after what they couldn't take. But inside that simple house, a woman who had once been humiliated by the love of her own children now lived with a rare kind of fortune, that of someone who owes nothing to anyone, no apologies, no explanations. And if someone asked her if everything she had lived through was worth it, perhaps she would smile and say, "It was, because love isn't what makes you win, it's what keeps you from getting lost." Many women, like Donna Elvira, have already discovered the weight of ingratitude. Some raised children who forgot them. Others loved so much that they were left with nothing, no affection, no memory. But even so, they remain strong. They continue to rise, even when the ground is gone. Donna Elvira's story is not just hers. This is for all the mothers who have seen love traded for self-interest. It's for all the women who were left behind, and yet moved on. It's for those who learned that dignity isn't something you ask for. It's something you carry. So, if you're listening to this story and felt a lump in your throat, know this: you're not alone. The pain you feel now was once the strength of another woman before you, and it will be the strength of someone else after you. Because love can disappoint, money can divide, but the heart of someone who is true always finds its way back to peace. If this story touched you, if you've already experienced the pain of starting over alone, or if you're learning to choose yourself after being hurt, follow our channel and become part of this community of strong women who transform their scars into courage. Here, every day, we tell real stories of overcoming, forgiveness, and rebirth. Because no woman should have to beg for respect. And together, we prove that the most beautiful love is the one that comes from within.